Bum 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 ba-dum ba-dum bum bum
Oh,
bum
mate,
bum
bum
bum.
bum 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 bum.
Man, 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 bum 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 bum.
Go on, let's join in. Money, man, bum 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 bum. Bash Bros.
Yeah.
What was it? What did I just hear?
I thought he died then.
No, yeah, I actually died.
Me and Dan thought the same thing.
I thought it was just a little bit too long. It was just a little bit too long.
That's it. Actually, he died doing what he loves on a podcast.
And we never knew what the third one was. That's how he should be remembered.
Everyone's playing that back again and again, trying to, like, you know, like if we play it backwards, maybe it says something cryptic. Like,
Yeah, there's a message.
something magical that he said. I can't remember what it was. His dying breath. We don't know what it was.
Right. Welcome back to Bash Bros Podcast, episode 60. We are very honored tonight. We've got another guest from across the pond, Scott Stevenson, Fortitude Training. If you don't know him, I'll do the usual thing. Go over to Instagram, give Scott some love, give him a follow. Plenty of information there for people to absorb, but hopefully we can get into some of that now.
A lifetime's work. And buy his book. Plug the book.
Yes, I got the book. It took me about a year to figure out that I just need to leave the book next to my chair.
There you go.
I can do this. I still feel cheesy when I do it, but you got to, you know.
Yeah. Right. So what we ask our guests to do, Scott, is basically give us the rundown on what got you into the sport, really, and a bit of a highlight reel of your career. I guess it's been a long one. So give us a whistle stop tour if you can.
Yeah. You know, I get this question a lot, and I needed to go under hypnosis or something to figure out, because I really don't remember a time when I didn't want to lift weights. Like as long back as I can go, pretty much. I wanted to, but there wasn't my mom wouldn't let me. It was part of it. And finally I got to start when I was a little bit ahead of the curve, and I was in junior high when I was 11, and they had weight training and you could do it. So I started doing it. But I think, I know I trained, and my dad had a DP set like up in the attic, and I would sneak up there. But that was 11 when I started, probably before then, because I went in there and trained, for years when I was in high school. So
What was the driving force? Do you remember? Like, was there a click in your head, or you just saw things and you're like, I must pick these up?
Yeah, it just seemed like something I wanted to do. There wasn't like, I saw He-Man on the cartoon or Superman, like, I didn't get sand kicked in my face. There's none of that kind of thing that happened that I can recall. I just was sort of drawn to. It was almost like, how they pick the Dalai Lama. They go and they show him, past life things, and if he recognizes them, then he's the Dalai Lama. It's almost like I had a past life that said, you need to lift heavy stuff. You need to lift weights. So that was like my one sort of subconscious driving force of some sort. But I finally got to do it when I was in junior high. So that was 11, and that's 40 years ago now. And I just kind of fell in love. There's something I can go on and wax philosophically about this sort of purity of it. From a Chinese medical perspective, you get to just sort of empty out your primal energy in a very basic way. That's just a fucking blast. It's like jumping out of an airplane. But I get to be a little bit of a scientist, and a tinker. My grandfather was an engineer, and like the penultimate tinker. I remember like when I was a kid, just watching him, and I would follow as much as I could. This is from a very young age and all the way through until his late 90s when dementia took over. But he was always working on stuff. He was completely self-taught too. So he actually used to teach college courses, and he had like a 5th grade education formally, but he became it was like actually an expert in cryogenics, and had some very cool stories. He dealt with liquid nitrogen, liquid oxygen, super cooling of things. So the government would employ him every once in a while to do some things, and he could always figure out what they're not telling him. They said, we want you to build this, And he's like, okay, I think I know why, but I'm not going to ask you because I know you're not going to give me an answer. So I had that built-in tinker in me, but I also, my mom's a social worker. My dad's a physician. He was a third generation doctor. So the exercise, the idea of helping someone and trying to like do something to make people's lives better was also sort of built into me. So you kind of combine all those psychological forces, and I figured out as I was going through and just wanting to learn and learn and learn and learn from like curiosity that just drives me to this day. I learned how much I love to teach. And I love just, that interaction, the community of the information, watching the light bulbs come on in people's eyes or above their heads, and so all that kind of came together, and I've kind of been able to, luckily enough, I think it's just, it's luck to some degree. Of course, everything, there's some amount of just happenstance that brings you to the places where you can do certain things in life. It's not all due to you to some degree, but I think just being so in love with what I do, enjoying it so much, has just made it such that I've been quote unquote successful. Because I haven't, it's trite to say, but I haven't really worked a day in my life. There have been some things I haven't wanted to do, but I just knew it's like, Scott, go and make your bed, then you can, go outside and play with the kids. Like, okay, I'll make my bed because it's gonna be a blast. So everything has been, overwhelmingly on the side of things that were gratifying for me, I guess you could say. So I started training, just tinkering around with things. It's interesting. I think I had never thought of it this way. So try to always lend a little bit something new, so I don't just continually repeat myself when answering this question. But I think probably just from a neuromuscular standpoint, from a motor standpoint, lifting at such a young age was obviously an advantage. That's what the Eastern Bloc athletes do. They try to find the aptitude in certain children based on the information they have, and then they bring them into the sport that maybe they've got the leverage for, that their parents had the genetics for, or what have you. And then you combine some predisposition to be good at something with what's going on developmentally. When you're just laying down, your neurons are just ripe to soak up and learn new motor patterns or learn new ways of thinking things. So just like kids learning languages, kids can learn 5 or 6 languages at a time if they just have exposure. And it's not a problem. Like, try to do that as an adult unless you're, just like super gifted polyglot, and it's not going to fucking happen very easily. At least you got to really ram it down your own brain. But I think, having lifted at such a young age gave me a sort of a developmental kind of advantage, I guess, in a way, because I've just been in the gym for so long. I kind of grew up, in the gym, and it wasn't, there was one gym, I was just telling someone this story. I can't remember who it was exactly, but about the main gym that I trained at in my hometown back in Illinois. It was literally a basement gym. You'd go to, it was in the town square. You couldn't tell there was even a gym there. They just had like, it was just on the glass. They had no lit up sign or anything. And you went down, and I think Dorian Yates' gym is a little bit like this. It's literally a dungeon. Like, the steps are so steep, like you kind of have to use the handrail because there's a chance of falling, especially if, like, you're trying to go, if you happen to go up and forget something on leg day, you don't want to go back down those steps. And so that was sort of, where I got my, sowed my oats, so to speak, or kind of, gnawed my teeth in a little bit. But a lot of it was training at home and just figuring shit out. So that's helpful. You take someone who's, you guys, I'm sure most of your coaches, and maybe you've done some lifestyle coaching, that kind of stuff, or you work with people and you have someone come in who's never really been an athlete, and you try to show them how to do exercises, and they're a quote unquote motor moron. They don't know what the hell they're doing. They can't tell what muscle's working. You touch it, you're trying to do everything to get them to have a mind muscle connection. It's just not happening. So I kind of had a little bit of a developmental thing, I think, that took hold. And I was a physics and German major in college. Didn't want to go to Germany and teach physics. Wanted to go to Germany actually and study there. There's a Sportschule in Cologne, a school there. There was like the only one at the time. But in order to do it as an American, it would have been a huge pain in the ass. So hung around in school, kept on learning. And in grad school here in the US, they'll pay for your school if you're an assistant, got to have an assistantship of some sort. So did a PhD, postdoc, was a college professor for a while. Didn't want to be in the ivory tower. It's a whole other kind of story associated there. But I left there. I went to knew I wanted to work with people, so I became an acupuncturist when I went to Arizona. Became an acupuncturist. Decided to stay. Resigned from my professorial position. Had a gym for 4 or 5 years. Competed a boatload when I was in Arizona. Moved to Florida the last about 8 years ago now, and I've been here to be closer to my mom and my dad. And all the while, just sort of transitioning, just kind of taking whatever comes my way. It seems like, I was personal trainer since like 92. Literally, I got certified in 92, 93. So it's been a little while, and I hoed that road, man, for many, many years, and in my own gym. And eventually I've always tried to, and it sounds, because I'm not like, I just don't, my brain just doesn't connect with the idea of people like knowing who I am, other than just, some other guy in the gym. So it's never going to. I try to like grapple with that notion. It's just not going to happen. But I've come to realize that, I do have an acquired amount of knowledge and kind of a unique place, and that I'm a sciencey guy. So I call myself a purveyor of bodybuilding brain candy. People like to hear me talk about shit. It's like, that was really cool. I'm not sure exactly what he said, and I couldn't tell anybody else about it, but wow, my brain loved that shit. It's like brain candy, it's like, okay. But I have an opportunity to help people in a certain way, and that's been in the writing books and articles and seminars and podcasts, this kind of shit. So that means that a lot of people know me, and I'm like, I don't like that doesn't like float my boat in any way. But then it's always like, dude, if you want more people to hear what you have to say, then you have to become well known, at least a small fish in the pond, not just a minnow. So that's kind of where I am. And yeah, 40 years of training, 30 years or so of personal training. Started competing in the late 90s. When I was in grad school, we had to do it covertly. You couldn't let it be known that you're competing, because it was so research focused. It's like you're taking away from your research time. So remember, I was like wearing like fully covered up in the summertime in Georgia, where it's very hot. It's like, why is Scott wearing a full sweats right now? It's like, well, because you're gonna be able to tell that I'm doing something weird. So luckily I'm my own boss now, so I can do whatever I like. But so that's been the path, man. Lots of little things along the way, and lots of trips to the UK, man. I hope I can get back, assuming this pandemic allows this shit. But I think I've been over there 4 or 5 times now to Body Power, 3 or 4 times to Body Power.
Get your tests out.
What's that?
Get your tests out.
Oh, yeah.
Different kind of test.
Yeah.
Right.
That wasn't just a really massive. To get, not that I'd know, because
Right. Yes. Absolutely. That'd be a great way to smuggle some shit in. Actually, just put it in a COVID test box. Or biological, biohazard. May possibly have COVID. No one's gonna open that box up.
The first
Omicron Delta super variant. Do not open.
Being massive. So which came first, like the science or the training? And when did you realize all these things are working? I want to know how they worked, and then work backwards from there, or were you researching stuff, finding scientific answers, and then applying them?
It's funny, when I was an undergraduate in college, I didn't even know there was such a thing really as sports science or exercise science or anything of that nature. I was a physics and German double major, so I was a very scientifically oriented guy. I loved science in high school. But I was thinking about this, some of the hardest training I've ever done was when I was in college, before I knew anything about exercise science. I did a program called Cybergenics, which is really old school. Franco Santoriello was the face person for that. You can Google him. He's still on Facebook. We were friends, at least on my old account that got hacked. But that program was just absolutely like mind-bogglingly like ridiculous. So but it was, they had a really nice selling point. You get this big box of all these supplements and you really know what was in there. It's like, bovine cholesterol and all this kind of shit, that's just pure bollocks and, bullshit. Right. But you train so friggin' hard, that, you had to go somewhere if you survived the training program and executed close to what they had you doing. I tell you about that later if you guys want to, just asinine. So I got done with college and I was in this, and this is kind of an important message. I get asked this a lot, like, why, what's your words of wisdom for someone trying to figure out if they want to go into bodybuilding? For instance, my good friend John Meadows, he made that leap eventually. He was working in banking. And finally, he's like, I'm getting to where I can make the jump. And he did it. And look, the guy's a friggin' legend now, pretty much. He helped so many people in making that leap. So I was an undergraduate and I was looking in. There was no internet at this time. So this is, we used to chisel our notes on slate, when I was in school. And so there's no internet. There's a Peterson's Guide to Graduate Schools. I found like 2 programs. What had happened was my mom spoke with my swim coach from when I was a kid, who had moved on and gotten a PhD at Ball State, which is a very good program. A guy named Dave Costal was there. It's still a really strong, really strong program. And he was in Colorado Springs at the swimming flume. They have a swimming treadmill there. And I thought that was a one of a kind. Yeah, they've got several of them now, but it was the only 2 in the world, I think, at the time. The other one was in Germany. And they had a sports science program there. So I went out there and started because they totally dropped the ball at my undergraduate. I got no guidance. There's plenty of exercise science programs. I just didn't find them. And they told me, like, this is the only one we know of. I'm like, okay, well, shit. I just didn't have anyone helping me. And the resources weren't there, but I just wanted to, at that time, I said, I don't want to be a physicist. I know that. I talked with, I really enjoyed physics, but I didn't want to be a research physicist. What am I going to do with undergraduate in German? I got to go to Germany. I don't want to be a German language teacher necessarily, but what do I like? What do I really fucking want to do? And I facetiously explained the story that, I really like drinking beer. I drank a lot of beer in college too. So Anheuser-Busch is close to my hometown. Maybe they need a beer tester down there. Could apply. I'd, be close to the parents and the family. My mom wouldn't be very proud of me if I were a gigolo. That was like the other kind of option. It's kind of like I'm trying to figure out something like, because at that point in time, I'm like, whatever I do, it's going to launch me in a certain direction. I had my dad kind of as a model, and he went to school, became a doctor, and then just worked his ass off his entire life, pretty much. Like really long days. We had like one family vacation growing up. So I'm like, whatever I do, it's going to be it, and that's going to be the way it goes. This is a long time ago, of course. Now people change careers all the time, I think, or much more so. So I'm like, I like this. I love the gym, man. I want to see if I can do that. Can I take something that I'm passionate about and not lose the passion by doing it as a profession? And I'm like, okay, all right, here we go. I'm going to try to become the world's best personal trainer. So literally, I just dug in. I took, I would call it discipline, just my general mentality of like going hard at things, which is how I've sort of done everything in most of my life. I've tempered myself back. Wisdom is sort of seeped in there a tad, but not a lot. So I just started studying that. So then I'm like, oh shit, there's some science out here. I heard about that program. I went to study, and that program was not set up for someone who wanted to legitimately study exercise science. They had a couple classes there that people who were doing biomechanics of swimming research could do if they wanted to have some classes while they're doing like a practicum on swimming biomechanics. So the program was just like kind of a joke, really. It was just, community coursework, and wasn't worth anything. So then eventually I got to University of Texas at Austin. Still just want to become the best personal trainer ever. But I started taking the hardcore exercise science class, exercise phys classes, and I loved them. And it's funny, that's like a kind of a research juggernaut class or program at University of Texas at Austin. John Ivey is someone you may have heard of in the context of nutrient timing. So he was like the second on my master's thesis there. So I took many courses from him. So they had 4 primary classes that were like the classes to do your upon which your your PhD would have been based. Like they're going to pull from these classes. You need to know every word that you heard or that was said in those classes, like backwards and forwards. There are certain studies you need to have absolutely memorized. And I went in and we were like 3 weeks into the class, and there's like 30 people there, and the class is pretty thick. And I had to take A and P, because I hadn't had those undergrads. All the basic courses I had to like get up to speed. And a guy named Jack Wilmore, who I think, I'm not sure he's around anymore, but he's a very renowned exercise physiologist. He's like, so I just want to know, who I'm speaking with here. He's a real cool guy. He's like, so how many of you want to get PhDs? There's like 30 people in the class, and everyone but me and one other guy raised their hands, because I didn't want a PhD at the time. Wasn't interested in that. That guy ended up being he was a strength coach, I think, in professional baseball. Awesome dude. He was the guy, like, if everyone didn't know who Joe Hughes was, I don't think Joe Hughes ever hear him in podcast, but Joe is a friggin' monster, an absolute beast, thick as shit. Like, he just loved picking up heavy stuff. And he had worked really long days. So he always had a gigantic cooler with him, like literally a friggin' family size cooler, because he had to be gone for so we'd say, Joe, the big guy, it looks like he's going to the beach. Yeah, that's with the cooler. Yeah, okay, that's Joe. All right, good. Because that cooler was just massive. There's probably 50 pounds in there with all the shit he carried around. So at that point, that was nothing. But I just loved that information. I just soaked it up. Of all of those people, half of them were gone after the first test because it was so hard. They dropped out. And only 2 of us ended up getting PhDs in the long run. One guy stayed there. It wasn't Joe. It was a guy named Desmond Hunt, who was an Olympic triple jumper, actually. And myself, and I ended up going to another school. So I just realized that I love the teaching. I love the learning. The research is fun. But I didn't want to be in a place where that was all it was about, because I know what that world is, and it's publish or perish. And it can be life sucking, without a doubt. Just crazy deadlines all the time. It would be probably more work than what I saw my dad do. And I knew I didn't want to do that at that point in time. So, but I got turned towards the science. I'm like, what, I can meld this shit together. I love reading and understanding the science. I've done a good bit of it too. You kind of have to, with the postdoc and PhD, and just staying connected with people as I have. We published that Peak Week article that you guys may know about. So that was really cool. But I try to be sort of a bridge in between the two, because I love, someone mentions like, how'd you get this guy on your podcast? And I'm like, dude, I'm just a fucking meathead like everybody else. I'm a really curious meathead. No. That's exactly what it is. I love to go and just like pound shit. I just love to go bonkers in the gym. That's as fun as anything. But I'm also really curious and sort of scientifically minded. And I think that's somewhat unique, to have sort of both lobes of the brain develop. So,
well, you were kind of the first guys as well. I know that at the beginning of Jordan Peters, you were in contact with him, and he was front loading a lot of your stuff, and that seemed to be like the birth of this new tie of the science kind of collaboration in bodybuilding, rather than like that drew away from bro science, which obviously has its place, and a lot of these studies don't necessarily take into the right demographic, so like a balance of both. But you were the guy who kind of pioneered that, and now we're in an age where it's expected for everyone to have all this science knowledge, and everyone's kind of playing catch up now, using long words they don't really understand. Instagram is a huge realm of just the longest words. If people understand your posts, then you've fucked it up.
Right. Yeah,
science
to that.
Science.
Yeah. But Jordan and I worked together long ago, and I think and Jordan's got a master's degree as well. He's not like he knows that it's somewhere in between. Like, what happens in the lab is the same thing that happens. It's the same world in the regular gym. There's limitations there, but you can take from that side of things, and you can blend those things together. The thing is, I think, is that science and big words can most definitely bamboozle people. And I try to tell people that you're smarter than you think you are, in a certain sense, There's all sorts of things that are going on in the background in our brain that allows people to be kind of tricked, so to speak, or to be bamboozled or flabbergasted or somehow led into certain ways of thinking because, wow, there's a sort of a cult or personality. Someone I wrote an actual entire article on this and I cover it in my book for Elite FTS. People can find. I should pull it up. Actually, if you guys have a second, I'll see if I can find
definitely.
this.
Definitely.
I've seen this before. He's savvy with the sharing, the screen sharing. I've seen it.
I don't know if I can do that, but hold on, I can read this to you because it's pretty interesting. Let me actually just find it. Let me just find it on my computer. It might be faster just to read it from there. But it's an article about knowing who to trust, basically, and how to figure out how to use your own brain. We got some pretty powerful computers up there that are capable of more than what we're sometimes aware of. That. You guys will like this, I think. Has the expert earned your trust?
Do not trust.
What's that?
Anyone who looks physically like Dan McNabb, do not trust.
Yeah, I was going to say the
Right.
same thing.
Does he even lift?
Oh no!
Is this a common theme you guys have?
What, taking the piss out of each other? Yes.
Uh-huh.
And it's
One of
I'm
the
being
biggest
very
qualities.
reserved. I'm
Is you-
respecting it, Scott. I'm just being very reserved.
yeah, it's usually a lot worse than this, but because
Go
you've got
for
lots
it,
of
man.
interesting to stuff, we don't have to pad it out with us completely destroying each other.
So check this out. So I wrote this, like this was a blast to write. Quote, imagine you read this shit, okay? And you don't have a background in biology, but you read something like minerals such as iron, zinc, and trace amounts of boron begin accumulating during embryonic development in the tissues that later differentiate into skeletal muscle. These metals form the base of the contractile machinery that imbues muscle cells with force-producing capability. Citation number 1, Smith, John Doe, Genetic and Dietary Control of Mammalian Embryonic Development, Muscle Tissue, Journal of Significant Results. Continue.
How many mil?
In adult mammals, dietary deficiencies in these elements have been associated with a variety of mild pathologies and muscle weakness, whereas iron, zinc, and chromium supplementation produce muscle fiber growth, including hypertrophy and hyperplastic adaptations. Citation number 2, D's and balls, T, muscle plasticity,
Balls.
structural mechanical bases. It continued, even in the absence of external load. The last reference, number 3, is from Dave Tate, John Meadows, Shelby Starnes, Mark Dugdale, Amit Sapir, Ken Skip Hill. Supraphysiological mineral supplementation induces murine muscle enlargement in microgravity. Journal of Mice and Men. That's complete and utter bullshit. But if you don't read the references, you won't know, because people don't read the references. It sounds really fucking good.
I was with you, especially when he said balls.
Yeah. You see
Oh my
that?
God, that was
This
loaded
guy, he
balls.
knows what he's talking about.
I saw. I'll just call them out because I don't care. I get the T Nation. I get all sorts of bullshit in my email. But this one, every once in a while, they have some good stuff. They had an ad. Basically, it was an article, so to speak, for phosphatidic acid. You guys, someone can go and read this. I'm just gonna call it like it is. I'm too old to beat around the bush, I guess.
We like that.
And they have, I think, 5 citations at the end of that article, or 5 references in a bibliography that's never cited. Now, in the world of academia, that's an academic integrity violation right then and there, because you can't have references that somehow you drew from unless you cite those. And I can tell you a story when I learned this the hard way when I was a kid, when I was in college, and I was sort of it was accidentally. But they added those at the end, but they don't refer to that information. You don't know where that's coming from. It's like name dropping, basically. You know, like me and The Rock, we're hanging out. It's like, you know, Dwayne Johnson, you guys hang out and stuff. It's like, oh no, that's my neighbor. I just call him The Rock because he looks like you're not clarifying this shit. It's important. You can't just throw references in there and not cite them. But people do that. And I call that out. I call someone else out in my book. So this sort of thing happens, and it's if someone asks a question, this is one way to test. Someone asks a question that's like kind of an obvious one. There's probably 100 other people that have that question. It's like, so what if I do this? You explain some exercise or some supplement, and I really don't know. I understood about 30% of what you said. Can you clarify this for me? And if you get a snarky remark, then unless there's been 100 of those, something like that, or unless you're trying to be snarky and it's obvious, then chances are that person can't break it down for you, or that's not someone. I just throw them out, man. Don't trust that, because too many people are trying to pull the wool over your eyes in so many ways, and some of them inadvertently too. Sorry, go ahead.
Or they're just regurgitating stuff that they haven't processed themselves without citing the person that it came from, like they were born with this information. That's something that fucks me off, is people think that it's a bad thing to cite stuff, that you got it from somewhere. You weren't born with this information. Like, you got it from somewhere. And so you came up with it. Oh, you did that in a lab? That's pretty amazing.
It feels a lot of dick measuring going on in the coaching community. Like, everyone's trying to outdo everybody. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
With I've got this new terminology of mesocycle, this and that. It's like, we're just trying to get fucking big. Like, we're trying to grow. It's not a mesocycle and intercycle of fucking. They just make shit up just to make it sound a bit more interesting.
Yeah. Well, there's a sucker born every minute. I mean, that's there's something to say for that. Mm-hmm. And if you can dangle a yummy carrot in front of someone that says, you know what, if I just have microcycles, what if I think I should nanocycle my reps in reserve?
Yeah.
Then I can make this shit happen,
Do you think it's because everybody's looking for the secret rather than just doing the fucking shit that works? Everyone wants to know the secret of why they're not that good.
Well, I think the proof is in the guest that we didn't have on 2 days ago.
Yeah. True, yeah.
I mean, the thing is that everyone's like I feel like people are now obsessed with the idea of bodybuilding rather than actually doing it. So they want to be big thing. They want to just think about it and think if they think about all of this stuff enough, even though they don't understand it, that somehow the actual just going in the gym and smashing the shit out of yourself doesn't actually need to occur, which is fine. You can be into bodybuilding from just an information standpoint, but that doesn't mean you're a bodybuilder. That's okay. You don't have to do. But I find a lot of people are asking questions that even if I gave them the answer, it would be a complete waste of my fucking time.
Well, they just dial in on the minutia things of like recovery and like sleep fucking apps and so on, but they haven't done the Cybex hack squat. But what my recovery says, and it's like, we don't give a fuck, because until you go balls deep and like Ant or Leroy is shouting at you and you're sick, you don't know what it is to be a fucking bodybuilder. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'll give you a little old guy's perspective. So a couple of different things. We can bring some sciencey shit in there and just like, long term. So there's a guy, I refer to this story a lot. So there's a guy named Rod Dishman, who's at the University of Georgia, where I did my PhD. And I still, when I was going there to sort of become a muscle biology expert, doing a PhD, he was an exercise adherence expert and had been for years. And I'm thinking, I take his exercise psych class, I'm going to get the age-old secret of like, how can you get people to just start exercising on their own? Like, how are you going to like turn on the intrinsic motivation switch? He had studied that stuff and he was the man in that area of research, of behavioral research. And he gave up on it after like 15 or 20 years because he realized there's some things you can do. There's all sorts of measures you can make, but you're just like, you're kind of pissing in the wind. And the way he phrased it was that we're creatures of immediate gratification. So you couple that with the fact that we've got immediate gratification devices here that are, always by us, giving us something new to look at, something fancy, something yummy, something, I want to be like that guy.
Literally just dopamine, like a hit of dopamine.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like there's it's a podcast in German. I've sent it to you. But there's a guy who talks about a bit of this. His name's Manfred Spitzer. He's a German, but you can find this research. This was the age-old research where they finally figured out where the pleasure centers, the reward centers were in rodents, and they just basic scientific research. They stick electrodes in various places and turn them on.
It's in the prostate, isn't it?
Yeah, in the mail. Yes, absolutely. And it's I'm not even. I was gonna give you the female analogy there. We're not going there. Like we'll get in trouble with that one. So that's another podcast for another time. So you put an electrode there, and literally these in their initial studies, they don't do these anymore because they're really inhumane. But they didn't know what's going to happen. You'll get the rodents will just start pressing these levers like 2,000 times a minute. Boom, 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 boom. You put water, you put food in their cages with them. They'll just press the levers until they die. Because why do they need food and water? They've got the lever. They've got the penultimate direct stimulation. It doesn't have to be processed, through the gustatory nerve, or they have to smell it through their olfactory nerve. It doesn't have to go through their limbic system. It's going right to. It's like Arnold. I'm coming all the time. Like these animals are just like coming all the time, and until they would die.
Where can I find one of these machines?
You could probably find some guy to do this. If you don't show up for the next podcast, everyone will know why.
Just got electrodes strapped to his dick. It's like,
oh, it's up in here. Yeah, it's up in here. It's in your brain. But so you've got that. So you're getting younger people, especially to some degree, and all of us, to some degree, are getting rewired because we've got just this mass of information flooding our senses. And so you kind of take that as background and then think about how maybe you guys got into the gym, or like I got into the gym. There's no such thing as a cell phone. When I was in Germany, there's no such thing as a cell phone. I didn't know what the word was for cell phone until like a few months ago when I started picking up German again. So you went into the gym, and if you were someone who was wired, and don't get me wrong, here's the thing. All of us, everyone here, we get off on going to the gym and beating the hell out of ourselves. So we're seeking out something that's pleasurable there in some way, shape, or form too. It's masochistic, but that's a form of pleasure seeking. So I have to like check myself, if ever I'm thinking, I'm a badass, like I'm the dude who goes in there and I'll squat till I puke or what have you. It's like, yeah, but there's a reward system that's being activated in you. You're just wired differently than someone who you might call a pansy in the context of going to the gym to train hard. So that's just how we're wired. So you take how someone like us maybe was introduced to the gym, and your culture, like the UK, you guys have a great fucking bodybuilding culture because you got Dorian and you got people, Leroy, you got people just getting nasty all the time. That's just kind of the idea. And that's sort of a standard. And we have that a little bit, but we've got, like Sean Ray, and I'm trying to pick on Sean, like Lifestyles of the Fit and Famous, I think was one of his videos, and there's just sort of like this American, like super rock star flair. It's very different. So, but when I went into the gym, like I just wanted to be there. And I saw guys who's in a basement, and like there were no women. I don't remember ever seeing, there's no such thing like as a woman. I don't think there's ever a woman down there. Maybe like the wife of the owner or something came down every once in a while. It wasn't about any of that, in the least. So that's just me being lucky as to who I was born into with my family, my genetics, everything, and the time. Imagine now, and this is like, I won't give you the full thought experiment. Imagine like you're born into a place in time where you just have like fluffy gyms, neon gyms, and that's your exposure to it. But you have this, complete misrepresentation of what the average person can get to, with training and diet on Instagram, where you've got like, it's the top 1 or 2% in the world, literally, that's coming across your feed that you're subscribing to. And like, you want to get there, and you got average genetics, and you're like, and there's nothing that's naturally within you that is wired to want to seek out painful experiences or to drive through what it takes to get on the Cybex hack. That's something that's kind of always been a part of how I'm wired. I don't know why. I think my dad and my mom are both a little bit like that too. I've seen them both train, and my mom hates to train. She has to have someone to talk to her, but she will train hard when she's there. And my dad used to just like annihilate himself. So there's some genetic proclivity there. So I think the tough thing is when people get it, like when there's this contrast between I want to look like this and I don't want to do what it takes to get there. And then you have the people that are like, okay, but that means you're a sucker for the nanocycling of reps in reserve or whatever the fancy schmancy thing is, or the supplements. It's exactly what the old school supplements ads did. They still do them. You take a pro who never took that supplement before he started getting it for free, who doesn't look like that because of those supplements. He looks phenomenal, but he could do, or she could do, pretty much anything, you know, as long as there's 3 grams of gear in there, let's say, and they look great. And that's not why they look, it's the supplement is not why they look the way they look, but it still works. Like that's such a, you're like, well, no shit, Scott. Like the average person should have known that somehow, but somehow it still tweaks us.
Of course it does. I remember reading the Flex magazines when I was younger. We talked about this a few times on here.
Yeah.
You see the transformation photos, and you instantly go out and buy a tab of Muscle Tech.
It had to be Muscle Tech. It had to be.
Right.
Was it Cell Tech or something like that?
Yeah.
Rot in your
It's
teeth.
like piss.
Yeah.
Noratine. That was it. Noratine makes you massive tomorrow. Well, it's interesting because you were talking about your friends studied over 15 years, basically the mentality about exercise adherence. And we're all there going, we're hardcore, we adhere to the exercise. But actually, the only thing is that we're still searching instant gratification. It's just that we get it just from smashing ourselves in the gym. I thought it was hardcore. This has ruined everything.
Yeah. I mean, people there, don't get me wrong. Like if there is something, see, discipline is a strange word. Like, you know, you guys probably get this. You go out, someone can tell you've been lifting and they say, oh, well, that takes a lot of discipline. And I'm like, no, I'm doing what I like to do. Like if someone said, you know, you got to go in there and have sex for 2 hours, 4 times a week. Like, okay, I guess I got to, you know, it's like, I want to do this.
Back to being a gigolo.
Yeah. I mean, in dieting down, like, I mean, you know, you don't, there's some days when you're like, you know what, I don't feel like training's going to be nearly as fun as it is like when I'm a month after the show and I'm fully fed and the pumps are great and et cetera, et cetera. But I still enjoy, there's still something built within me that enjoys that challenge. You go in there, there's some of those days where you're like, you know what, there is nothing like you, some part of you says, no one else will be doing this shit, but I want to fucking do it because I want to defeat gravity today in a major fucking way. It's going to lose. I'm a primal fucking force of nature. Hear me fucking roar. And that's a blast to do. That's so much fun, right?
Yeah. When I'm on prep, it's the only thing that I like doing. The time in the gym is like the only time, like counting down the fucking hours, obviously the seconds between meals and that, but like that's the only time of the day that I actually like.
Yeah.
I think we live in a society where everyone is now unequal. So even the guys who talk about doing it, they feel like they're equal to the guys who are actually doing it. And that's the thing, is a lot of people talk and talk. My training partner is a prime example. He'll tell me exactly how he's going to get to the next set of weights and how he's going to put a bit of weight on, but never ever happens. Never happens. Just talk.
Yeah.
Smash his face in. How dare he talk? Smash him.
Just talk.
That's kind of, I mean, I have a sort of, I guess, kind of pity. That would be horrible to be in that kind of a place, to be in a place of disillusion. I tell you, it's sort of like, there's another kind of thought experiment for you. And, you know, if someone could hypnotize you into thinking that you're just anything that you aspire to be, or that you're going to be able to go somewhere that you think you will, and you actually believe that, but it's not the case. Like you're a wannabe, let's say, but you don't know you're a wannabe. Name whatever the wannabe is, becoming a bodybuilder, becoming rich. I've met people before, I'm sure everyone has, they're disillusioned about what they can actually do. And that can be, as long as they're happy in what they're doing, you know, they're not aware of it, and then they're just blissfully ignorant. That could be okay too. But imagine if you are sort of the belief, you know what, I'm going to get there, maybe like your training partner. I don't know other than what you said about it, but it's like, what a horrible place that would be in. It's like every time you go in the gym, you got to kind of puff up and like try to like suspend your disbelief that you don't look the way you've been talking about looking for the last 3 years, that you're not getting it done.
Yeah, I think
I don't think they realize it though, do they?
The big thing that is though, right, I think is people's why. So what is your why? Like if you don't have a why, then what is going to make you go to that point, you know? And Yeah, I think Dan talks about it quite a lot. You know, when he talked about, he did a sketch on how he spews in his mouth and he hates the way he looks, and that's what pushes him to that point. Like, if you're pretty content with, you know, who you are and how you look, you're never really going to push yourself to that extreme, are you?
I've had the same. Yeah, I've had the same thing. Was where like even when it was coming through like the amateur ranks, it was like, oh shit, I need a pro card. That once I get that pro card, once I get that pro card.
Oh, trust him to mention his
No,
pro.
I don't. But like then and now, like I was like, it's not a big deal. Not saying it's not a big deal, but like in a sense, like now the hunger because I'm at the bottom of the ladder again. Because I know I've got so much more work to do to get to the top of the pros because I'm nowhere near that standard. It's like relit that fire and it must be hard like for people who don't have that, you know, inside them, that why. Because I got to a stage where I was like, what's the fucking point? Like just doing the same shit over and over again. I'm getting nowhere. And like it's the same result. You're gonna do well, get to an overall, lose an overall, and then it's like, okay, go back again. But then now it's like nice because I can actually progress.
Yep.
Yeah. I'm really big, and I get a lot of inquiries. People want to do consultations with me, and I'm really big on setting up goals. And it's amazing, and maybe this is just the function of the internet and Instagram or what have you, but I get a ton of people, and some of whom you wouldn't necessarily expect this because they've got good positions with their job or what have you. And I say, so what do you like? What do you want? Like, where do you want to be, like with your bodybuilding? And I say specifically, we need to have something that's measurable with a given time frame. So, you know, you want to be able to be on stage one weight class up in true contest condition at 4% body fat. So, and that's going to be in 2 years from now. We'll measure that with DEXA. You've got previous DEXA measurements. You know, then we can construct a plan that's going to get you there, and we can work that out. Then you know exactly what it is. It's this show. It's the Mr. Leeds or whatever it is that you want to win. And you know, that's how it is. They can't do that. I get, and I think it's a function kind of what we're talking before of the instant gratification and just the dopamine release. I get goals that are sort of nondescript, like I just want to be the big dog or something like that.
Stop ringing him, Dan. Stop ringing him.
Sorry. Please, I want to be the big dog.
The biggest fish in pond. And to some degree, that's sort of what we all sort of want. Like everything is giving us that. And the interesting thing about it's funny what you said about the pro card, because if you look at the neurophysiology of this, the reward centers are lit up when we're en route to getting what it is that we desire.
Yeah, we're seekers rather than actual. It's like a momentary bit of joy, but it was the process that was the great bit about it.
Yeah, and those centers quiet down after you get what it is you're looking for.
Yeah.
So you need another carrot sort of to get you motivated to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing. I think it's difficult, especially, I mean, I can't imagine. Here's the thing. I don't know for sure how I would do if I were born 30 years later and you're trying to navigate this sea of good information and bad information and misinformation and who knows what that's out there to try to figure out, well, what should I do? Like, I mean, the reps and reserve thing, that, you know, and there are people that do make progress. I know people who've taken that as one way to train, where they increase their volume, they create a volume overload. These are people who know how to train, like their 3 reps in reserve is really 3 reps in reserve, you know, and they're 2 and they're 1. It doesn't work for everybody. These are not people like, you know, okay, you got 10 reps. I saw nothing that indicated you're anywhere near the end of that set. Then, you know, that's a whole other topic we could talk about too. But you take that information and like, that's a really good sell, and it does work for some people. And the confusing thing, I think, is that, and this is, you can see this even in some of the questions that came across on Instagram. People are looking for a black or white answer. Give me this or that. And it's not how it is, you know?
Yeah.
So many shades of gray.
Because we live such in an instant world now, everything's instant, everything's next day, everything's at your doorstep, everything's at fingertips, that everybody, when I say, like, they say, oh, when do you think I'm going to turn pro? And I'm like, you're looking at 5 to 10 years. They don't want to hear that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll be like, oh, but so-and-so did it in, it's like, you're not fucking them.
Yeah, it's 1%.
You're not them, because otherwise we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that's interesting too, when you talk about, you know, the pro card, and I've I can tell stories of many people and they, especially in the U.S., this doesn't make me any friends politically probably, but they've leveraged the pro card as the end all be all. And I mean, it doesn't have near the value and worth. It's not nearly the accomplishment it was 20, 30 years ago. And there are people that just want that pro card, and they just want it because everyone else wants it. It's like what the market says is valuable. They're not really sure why and what that means to them, what they're going to do with it. And I know a guy I haven't seen him for years now. Great guy from gyms here in town. I train at often, and he was pretty new to the game. Really, he was a personal trainer. Really, interested in things. He used to ask me tons of questions all the time. Loved chatting with him. He just wanted his pro card. And one of the days, just to give you an idea of like his general knowledge level of bodybuilding, I mentioned Lou Ferrigno, and he didn't know who Lou Ferrigno was. He never heard the name before. So like, okay, like, all right. He's like, not that you have to know who Lou Ferrigno is to do well, but it just kind of told me, well, he got his pro card, and then I think he's doing something else. Like I haven't seen him in the gym. He's gone. He's just sort of vanished.
They should make them like do like a citizenship test for bodybuilding. Like you can only have your pro card.
Right.
Well, see, but they used to do it where you won your pro card and then you had to write to the IFBB to explain what you were going to do with it. Because I know this with Wendy McCready, she got hers and she had to write a cover letter to explain what she was going to do with it. I mean, the UK was handing out one a year, and that was ever. Like, now obviously it's all gone fucking ape shit, but like, even if you won it, they wouldn't necessarily give it to you. You'd have to write a cover letter, like a little CV. Like,
you're right. Yeah.
Why do you want your pro card? Fridge magnet.
Yeah.
Put it in my bio.
Right.
Yeah. For my bio, definitely.
Yeah. That's kind of what it is now. It's sort of a stamp, but it doesn't really mean much. It doesn't mean that you're capable of competing at the highest pro level by far.
This is what people don't understand. You have to be at that level, and I think some people think, oh, my life's it's going to change. It's going to change nothing. You do the same cardio on the same machine. You eat the same food. You train in the same gym. Nothing changes. But what it is, I think, as well, is because it's become so fashionable. Like, oh, I'm a pro. And there's fucking in our world now, in England, sorry, there's that many different federations giving out different pro cards. It's like fucking everybody's a fucking pro. You could just say Dan. You just say you're a pro.
Shut up. NABA's been around for a long time, okay?
Did you have to write a cover letter?
Yeah. Dear NABA.
Yeah. I will still compete in the over 50s.
The thing is too that the pro card can have I've seen this too many times. You get your pro card and you're like, well, what do I do now? Like, I'm not going to go up against Big Ramy. I'm not going to be on the Olympic. I'm like, I'm not in that class. And that could be it. Like then like literally your passion for something is kind of gone. You don't go back. That's not thought of.
The same as Peter Molnar. Peter Molnar didn't take his pro card didn't attempt for his pro card for years because he was doing so well as an amateur that he didn't need to.
Well, PCA he was winning serious money, going all over the world, earning actual coin.
Yeah, Jose Raymond, he qualified for a pro card. Like,
he turned it down. We had him on here. He was telling us, and he was doing so well without it. He was like, "I'll get it later."
Yeah,
I'll pick it up later.
He was a welter and a lightweight in the middle. He was what was 40 pounds or more below what his eventual top stage weight was as a 212er. So I think he was competing, just with God's given genetics at that point in time.
Yeah, he won a pro show with naturally, didn't he?
He won all. I think he won those. I don't know about pro shows, but I think he won those shows. Yeah, given that he jumped 50 pounds after he got in the pro ranks, I think he won those shows pretty much, just running on what his body was producing. And
he liked a beer.
Yeah.
Jose likes a beer.
He does. I've been sat at a table with him where he's drinking a beer after the Arnold Classic, for instance. So good dude, man, real good guy.
Just get stuck into some of these questions then, because people have asked a few, and I just don't want to leave them for too long. So first one from Jamie Price. He
Dogs.
said, obviously, you and John were always huge advocates for peri-workout nutrition.
Peri Peri chickens from Nando's. It's
Are you going to bando?
a very popular eatery here in the UK.
I know. I have Nando
Can't
sauce in
differ
my
on
fridge.
this.
I know Nando.
Really?
Yeah.
It's made it.
The
What's
secret sauce.
Yeah.
what's Scott's thoughts on the importance of peri-workout nutrition and how would it should it be approached to maximize recovery?
All right. So there's all the big buzzwords in there. Maximize recovery, like maximize. So okay, not sure what that means. I've got a whole talk I give on this. It's probably out there for free. I've done it several times. I've done it for charity and various things. And there's actually, speaking of Elite FTS, there is a 3-part article. It's the very first thing I wrote for their site. It's ginormous. And most of that information still kind of stands. It's not really much that's changed. So the whole idea, like I said, I can talk about this forever. Whole idea is to have the nutrients and the hormonal milieu, so insulin mainly being elevated, which is going to actually help reduce your cortisol as well, which seems to be important for making gains and progress in the long haul. There's science to back that up during your workout. So you're basically kind of multitasking, not a thing that guys are usually good at. But if you have eaten a big meal and you go into your workout and you don't train for 3 or 4 hours and you still have food coming in, nutrients coming into your bloodstream, you basically have what's going on with an intra-workout or a peri-workout. If not, if you wake up in the morning and you just aren't hungry and you want to start, you have to boogie off to the gym, you take something early, you have a nutrient, intra-workout shake that you start drinking beforehand, then you accomplish the same task. And I just give the obvious kind of basic example. So you got a push day, chest, delts, and triceps. Oh, there's a beast.
One of the guys.
Big Ron.
Monster.
Big
Little
Ron.
gremlin. That one's got gremlin genes. I have a gremlin over here too.
They are dickhead.
Yeah, they're all sleeping right now. So you train chest at 8 o'clock. You're done with chest at 8:30. And let's say you haven't had anything. You finish your workout with delts and triceps at 9 or so. You do a little cardio afterwards. Then you take in some food at like 9:15. And now you've just gone, 45 minutes, maybe an hour with the lag and gastric emptying before you got anything in. So the research has demonstrated just a small amount of like 6 grams of essential amino acids can advance your protein synthetic effect from training. So this way you got that going early on ahead of the time. So you're basically just multitasking there. There's data suggesting that even when calories are the same, just the timing itself can improve gains. But it's not going to matter for someone who's, let's say, taking in 6,000 calories during the day necessarily, because you got so much food if you're not eating anything during your workout. On the other hand, when I've been at 6,000 calories, it was really advantageous to have 1,000 calorie intra-workout, to use a nutrient timing approach, because that way I don't have to try to jam in some monstrous meal at the end of the day, a 2,000 calorie meal or something like that, when my GI is already stressed. So it can help in the situations when you're really pushing the food, because you can basically, you get very used to this. I went up to over a 2,000 calorie shake back in the day just to see if I could do it. Just sort of a proof of concept type of thing. Not that you necessarily need to do that, but that was nice. If I took in 2,000 calories from my workout, I didn't have to scramble home for a post-workout window.
I bet that was like drinking syrup.
It was a monster. Yeah. There's these worldwide nutrition 1,000 calorie maltodextrin based drinks, fruit punch, like with 1,000 of those, and then I added like 3 scoops of protein, and then I think like a Labrada lean body packet, like 2 or 3 of those, something like that. So those, or the Metrics had some packets as well.
Yeah.
So that was like 2,000.
So around the workout, like the peri-workout, do you try and keep fats low?
I do, yes.
Yeah.
So person mentioned John. John used to have fats before the workout for the situation that you wouldn't want to go hypo at the end of the workout.
Mm-hmm.
It tends to slow gastric emptying, so you're going to get a more steady elevation of blood sugar. Mm-hmm. You can get a reactive hypoglycemia. Like if someone were to say, let's say, take some like glucose, like 50 grams, and they just slam it at the beginning of their workout because they don't want to be bothered with the shaker bottle during their workout. They train for an hour and a half, you could get, and they do that maybe 15 minutes beforehand, they get a really high spike of insulin, and the carbs are in and out. And now the insulin has insulin sensitizing effects. The exercise combines with that. Now you can drive your blood sugar too low, and then you go hypo during your workout. So that's one of the reasons John did that. Plus, I think he liked eating some of that stuff too, to be honest. We trained once and we went by, I think it was Hardee's, and we got a couple of those, like those biscuits, those breakfast biscuits. And he ate like 2 of those before we worked out. I'm like, dude, I'd be throwing up, but he liked that shit, you know, because it kept a nice, lots of carbs and fat and a little bit of protein.
Fuck the biscuit.
Fuck the biscuits.
Yeah. So, but if on the other hand, if you're someone who's dieting down and you've got minimal calories,
Drop that out.
and let's say you got minimal carbs coming in, you want to, one of the other questions is staying full while dieting down. Putting your carbs at that time point is going to be the fastest way to ensure that those carbs are either used for the training. If your glycogen levels are getting low and you're starting to bonk. I was in another podcast, and the person, Michelle was her name, she'd never heard of the word bonk before in the exercise context. So that's, you guys know that word as in terms of as far as exercise goes?
I think definitely an American thing.
Okay. It's a marathon thing, actually. So in the marathon, turns out around mile 20, guys will typically bonk if they haven't glycogen super compensated. So they run out of glycogen. So that the glycogen allows them to maintain a faster pace. It can provide ATP at a faster rate. So they're cruising along, and all of a sudden they just run out of that preferred fuel. They have to go slower. And literally it's like they hit the wall, or they call that bonking. That'll happen when you're prepping. Sometimes you literally maybe get a little bit of a weak pump at the beginning of the session, and then you start your training like, okay, I got 12 reps. It just feels like you can get 12, and you get to 8 and you're like, the fuck? Just things don't work.
Yeah.
I think you're bonking. It's the same metabolic. It's the same thing. You're running out of glycogen.
Right.
So having some carbs during that period can, one, give you some carbs, because you can replenish glycogen during your rest periods rapidly, actually. And that's been demonstrated with high intensity interval training studies. And carbs during weight training can be ergogenic too. Oh, someone's getting into shit.
he's got a much bigger one as well.
Yeah,
I got a Cane Corsa as well, and he's just had surgery on his eyes, so he's a bit pissy.
Oh, so that's a good time to have those carbs there. People like to eat their carbs, I understand, but sometimes that can be helpful for people. That's the last thing I will pull when someone's dieting, if they're using that kind of a strategy.
Yeah.
If at all possible. And replenishing the carbs are important too. If you stay in a glycogen depleted state for a long period of time, that can have a negative effect on protein balance. So you don't want to be flat all the time if you can avoid it. So you got 100 grams of carbs you're going to take in. That's where your diet's set up. Take that in. You know, you can make it through the first half of your workout. Take that in with some protein during your workout, and use those carbs to at least elevate your glycogen levels and keep them from flattening all the way out. That could have a helpful effect on retaining muscle mass. So that's a whole bunch of stuff like all at once, but that's kind of the idea.
That's kind of like what I tend to do, is I just work away from the workout. As I'm dieting somebody down, I just reduce the carbohydrates away from the workout.
Absolutely.
But to be fair, like saying on an intra shake, that's normally where I'll push carbs when people are struggling to eat. So originally I'll start just taking from them, and then I'll just leave, say, 25 grams in there, just as a, yeah, it's that's the best way I've found to do it personally.
Yeah, that works. Been doing that for 15 or 20 years. It works really well. Really well.
Okay, so George W. Bush, do you think there's any truth in the old man condition assertion? Why are dogs the best things in the universe? And what is the best thing you learned from your good friend John Meadows?
Those are good questions, man. So, what was the first one?
What is old man assertion?
Yeah,
I guess he meant old man condition. Yeah, so I'm guessing he's
the dermis thins out as we age. It's one of the easiest ways. There's a couple things that I think are involved. He's probably heard me explain this before, but maybe not. So yeah, if you look, you can look at like the skin fold caliper tables, like the Dernan and Womersley table. It's one that people use. And if you look at, for a given skin fold, you'll have a lower number at the same body fat for older age groups. That's because the dermis is not the subcutaneous layer. but those other parts of the skin get thinner as we age. So that typically happens, unless maybe using a massive amount of growth hormone. That won't necessarily be the case. Like that can actually thicken. You look at acromegaly patients, they'll have thicker skin generally. There's at least one study showing that. And the other thing is that I think if you're someone who's been at it for 20, 30 years, like as long as George, you know, people always, you know, you've seen like when he got in shape, it's like 2 or 3 years ago now, and he was just fucking diced like crazy. People are like, oh, you just got old man skin. Like, you know, it's easy for you. It's like, oh, that wasn't easy no matter what. I don't know. But you spend that long, and I think there's a different time frame in terms of the adaptation that happened in the vascular system, in the surface vessels. Because you guys have maybe seen this, like you diet down for the first show and you got veins here, there, and there. And then over the next, like maybe 10 years or so, you've got veins like all over the place, and veins on veins. And like, I know on my legs, I have veins on the skin, and then the veins that are rooted on the muscle fascia. You can slide the skin over one, and some veins move and the others don't. And it's like, wow, they're awesome. Eventually they can get to be too much.
Yeah, Dan knows about that.
Yeah, I had to start again. I had them all ripped out.
Yeah, right.
Varicose.
I had to start again.
So that happens over the course of years, I think, with lots of training where you're producing a lot of heat. That's the way your body dissipates heat, is with those surface vessels. You've also got blood pressure, like doing a leg press, your blood pressure can get to like 300 over 200 easy. And especially if you're holding your weight. Yeah, it can go sky high. So that will, and you see when that happens, a lot of times the vessels will be blown out too.
What if you only do partial reps?
You have to get to at least beyond 3 reps in reserve if you want to have this effect. Otherwise, no. So I think that's something that happens too. And that grainy look, that old man skin, I think is something to do with vascularity, with like having lots of those veins. You know, maybe not when they're in a mass like a varicosity type mass. So that's a different deal. But having lots of veins, it gives a grainy look to the skin. You know, it's granular basically. So I think those two things can happen over time. You take someone who's been training for a while, plus guys like George or someone who's been at it for a while. You want to get a little bit better each friggin' time. So if you're like in your 40s, let's say, and you've been doing this for 20 years, you've got some screws loose. Sorry, I'm not speaking of myself too. And you know what it means to be in shape, and you want to get at least in as good shape as you were before or better. So you look at your average, let's say 25-year-old compared to your average 45-year-old on stage, at least at the high levels. Those 45-year-old guys, maybe they're genetically gifted, they came at it late in life, but a lot of them have been at it for 10, 15, 20 years. They know how to get in shape. The average 25-year-old, they're not quite sure. They don't know what they're doing. Too many reps in reserve, whatever it might be. I'm picking on that. Sorry, Mike. I'm not picking on you, man. I hope we get a laugh out of that. But that guy is going to have better experience. So you don't have, it's not a cross-sectional, comparison necessarily. You're not taking like the average person with 3 years of bodybuilding experience when you look on stage in a 40+ masters category at a high level and compare that with, mid-20s or novices, let's say. So
you feel it's because they could possibly stay in better shape all year round as well. Because obviously in your 20s, you're like, let's get massive, just eat as much as possible, add loads of body fat and look big in the gym. And the older guys know that they don't need to be pushing up 40, 50 pounds in an off season to be obtaining 2 to 3 pound of muscle. Where I see a lot of the older guys, they stay in a lot better shape all year round.
I think they realize that makes sense, right? They've got the muscle already, so the bulking is going to get them. It's going to gain 30 and then lose 30, something like that.
Yeah.
Plus, for me, I think I've always noticed is that this has been going on for 10, 15 years now, is that it takes a little bit longer for the skin to come back. So, 10 years ago, I'm like, okay, if I need 8 weeks to get the fat off, then I'm going to need a 12-week diet because the skin's going to lag behind, at least for me. That happens to some degree for everyone. Like Dexter was an example of somebody who, and I heard Chad Nichols talk about this, and I was like, Dexter's skin just looked amazing all the way through his career. And that's the genetic thing, there's like people of Asian descent have a phenomenal skin. They're 50 years old and they look like they're 22. You know, like my buddy Alan Aragon is an example. He posted something recently and he showed like 10-year difference, and it's like, or maybe it was 15. It's like, there's no difference. He didn't age a day. He looks like he went backwards. It was amazing. So there's differences in skin, I think, that can be part of that. But, and two, you know, that this sort of weeding out phenomenon too. You're looking at the best guys at the top of the heap in that older group, then those are the ones who have good genetics for getting lean to some degree. If their genetics were such that it was just unbelievably difficult for them, you know, average or subpar genetics to get lean, they probably wouldn't keep doing it. They wouldn't be there, you know. So there's a bunch of things I think to go into that, but I think there's definitely just something that has to that something to the idea of, like, the older you get, the more granular you're going to be. That old man, you know, leanness, it can definitely happen for sure.
Do you think, like, the first time you go in and bring it, that's the hardest? Like that fat you've been carrying around your whole life, and then you go and do a prep and it's the first time it's ever gone? Or do you reckon it's solely what you've been talking about? I mean, the first time I competed it was a long time ago, but it felt like, and the people that maybe are prepped for a first show, do you think it's the mentality that makes it harder? They're just not ready for it mentally, or it is actually harder?
Well, I think you just said the same thing, actually, kind of, because,
well,
yeah, it's harder. It's all in your mind. It's really, I mean, obviously there's signals that come from leptin and the hunger signals. Those things are all there. Like there's physiological signals that are telling you certain things, but like this is exactly the same thing. But imagine you've got to go to the bathroom. You're on a road trip, you know, and you know that you're like 10 miles away, you know, like, I need to go to the bathroom. So like you're walking, you look and you see the road marker, and it's like, oh, 5 miles, or, you know, 7.5 kilometers away. And then you get like 2, and then finally you get off the exit and you're like almost there. You get right to the bathroom, you're about to piss yourself. Now, if that's not because like that's the way your bladder filled, it just happened to coincide with right before you're in front of the bathroom, it's because it's there, you know?
Yeah, but I've shat myself because of that methodology before. I was like, I'm gonna get to like this bit, and then I was so close to home. I was like, I'm definitely gonna, and I just shat myself.
Yeah. Okay.
So, I mean, I don't know. Maybe I think it was like I coughed, and that was the end.
Yeah.
But
they may have been just bad luck, you know. I'd suggest like a bucket to have in the back of the car.
I should have gone for the bush, but, you know, I saw the bush, I weighed it up, I thought I was wrong. Bad times.
The turtle made the exit.
Well, once is bad luck. Twice, 3 times.
now we're starting to, now it's a habit. Now it's a problem. And then
it's just something I do now.
It's become fun, though.
Just see how long I can hold it. Just go to work. Can I do the whole day?
Are you coming back this week, honey? Like you know, the family wants to see you again. I gotta push it one more day. I know. Oh, shit.
Right, okay. So next part of that question was,
I don't know if I answered that question. Dan had one there, but
yeah. So the next one was,
he doesn't care about me.
What was that? Sorry.
So let's move on. Johnny's the kind of quiz master. We'll let him get on.
No, I'm just trying to make sure that we're not here all night and get through some of these questions.
No, I'm so busy, man.
Fuck you, Dan. Yeah. So asking why dogs are life or whatever. What was it? Why are dogs?
Well, let's make sure we can do it by not being able to read the word dog, and then.
Well, I've moved on. I was looking at other ones. Why are dogs the best thing in the universe? I'm guessing that's Scott.
Dogs are enlightened beings. I think they live in the moment, and they forgive really well, and they get past shit that, you know, humans hang on to shit all the time. We're humans are like hanging on to shit in the past, like someone did something to me, you know, or I can't believe they said that to me, or they're just scared shitless about the future. Whereas dogs are like, you know, in large part, they're living in the moment, you know, like something happened, and dogs can be terribly traumatized, like curl up in the corner, like they're just don't even want to come close to a human. And like you watch, and I get all these stuff on like the dodo and that sort of thing on Facebook. And, you know, you rehab a dog and the dog just becomes this like happy-go-lucky, awesome, you know, animal that just wants to lick you and have fun and play ball and do whatever it wants to do. And can do that in like, 6 months of, just getting the right experiences. Whereas humans, we don't come back from that nearly as well. Unfortunately, most of us don't. So they just have this like natural tendency to gravitate towards living in the moment, where they're just like, they're little angels that are really brought to us. Like the history of how like dogs and humans started interacting, and like, how we kind of symbiote the two species is really fucking badass. And yeah, they're kind of meant to be around, I think, to comfort us in the way that they do. So yeah.
That's why I've just spent $5,000 on Abe's eyes.
Yeah. Yeah. My little gremlin, she's snoozing over there. We just took her spleen out like about 4 weeks ago.
Not yourself. I mean, I know you're a doctor.
No. Yeah. No. Well, I feel like it was, given that I paid like 10 grand for all these things, like I feel like, I contributed something.
Yeah, well, you should have been able to have a go at it. You pay so much, you should be able to be there and have a go first.
I would have loved to, actually. I think I would have been okay with that. I've done, medical shit. I'm a phlebotomist and biopsies and all that kind of crap. I love that stuff. My dad was a surgeon, so it would have been fucking cool. But yeah. So that's the dog thing is they're really pretty friggin' amazing.
Okay, so the next one is the meaty one. What was the most important thing or the best thing that you learned from your good friend John Meadows?
There's so many things. The thing that popped right in my head, I'll just say that one is, and it's something I think that John learned from Dave Tate too, because I think that's how he couched it. So he's giving credit to where it came from. So I'm trying to do the same, if I'm remembering correctly, is like, don't like share everything you have that's worth sharing. Just it's good things will come back to you eventually. Like, don't try to hoard secrets, and those sorts of things. And I always was, the one thing I was torn about, like the only thing I ever like didn't really share was what people are now doing. And it's been published in that paper that we mentioned before, the Peak Week paper, was the head down tilt idea. Because I was sharing that with clients. I've been doing that for years with people. Because, and you guys know what I'm talking about when I say the head down tilt thing. So the people will start doing this now. Yeah. Read about it in the paper. So here's something I'll give you. This is kind of a cool science. This is science and bodybuilding come slamming together in a really kind of cool way. So drying out's important the night before a show, right? You want to come on stage as dry as you possibly can. And me being an exercise physiologist, sort of trained in the formal way, I'm exposed to all sorts of stuff. The microgravity thing I talked about when I was reading that facetious description of mechanism of muscle contraction. Well, that's outer space. One of the things they've done and tried to do is figure out countermeasures for all the shit that happens in outer space. And one of the big problems for the astronauts is when they would come back down from being in space just for a week or so, they couldn't even stand up because they had lost so much blood volume. They couldn't even do like press conferences. They'd be passing out. So the cardiovascular effects of microgravity mean that your blood doesn't get pulled down by gravity when you're sitting or standing. It floats back up to your heart, and it's received by the right side of your heart, stretches out the atrium. Atrial natriuretic peptide gets released. Natriuresis is sodium loss. Water follows sodium. That hormone has a diuretic effect and causes water loss because it senses when you're in outer space, which is not something we evolved to do, obviously.
So the night before a show, you need to go to space.
Yeah, I'm writing this down.
That's the way to do it. Yeah, hire the space shuttle in advance. Tan, suit, space shuttle. That's the way. Like, all those things. Talk about expensive. That's going to be my new organization. Pro cards for everybody. No, you're tanning. You got a $1 million investment. We'll give you your pro card no matter what, and you get a trip to outer space on the space shuttle. We're good to go. I love it. So, anyway, back to the space. They tried to figure this out on how can we mimic that so we can study it and come up with countermeasures. And exercise is one of those. It keeps the baroreceptors tuned up so you don't lose the blood volume. There's a whole sort of side story there. And the way they do it on land at sea level is they put people in bed. That's the bed rest, the lack of muscle contractions because nothing weighs anything in outer space. And they put you on a head down tilt so that all your fluid flows back to your heart, and it causes that same diuretic effect. You lose plasma volume. So then they could say, okay, what if we have someone lie in bed for like a month, but every 30 minutes we have them, like 30 minutes a day, we have them do some exercise. And that actually is something that they've demonstrated actually will help offset this loss of plasma volume and the fact that, these guys were coming back and their cardiovascular systems were all screwy for several days. So I'm like, okay, well, that's kind of cool. You can drop water if you lie with your head down low. So I started doing that years ago. I'd go up to shows and I bring more bricks with me, and I get telephone books from the hotel. So back when they had telephone, you got yellow pages, or the ironing board or a chair, and I jack my bed up. And when you do that, it has to be the whole bed, not just the feet, but your whole body is like this. Your blood goes down. You can actually probably get an extra 2-3 pounds of water off overnight from that effect, just from being a head down tilt. 6 degrees is what they found matches what happens in outer space. You can go a little bit higher, but the problems are, and just went back and forth with some guy on this, if you've got gastric reflux or GERD, that can be an issue. So you don't want to like eat a big meal and then go to bed, because all your food's gonna go the wrong direction. And
or if you shit yourself like that, and it's gonna run down.
That's true, right?
No, it'll like just push it back in.
It'll run the wrong way.
I'm taking notes. I'm going to beat my record with this technique.
It'll be like a shit fountain just coming in and out over and over again.
What could be better? Alice, set the banner.
Make notes. So that's something, because I wasn't able to kind of oversee it, and I wanted to not just like throw this out there, because you never know, someone's going to do something crazy and like try to hang from the ceiling, in gravity boots or whatever. But I tried it out and tested it out and had enough experience with it. So, that's the only thing that I really had ever kept from clients, bringing this back to John. And now, of course, that's out there. And I've heard from, dozens of people who did that with great success. A lot of people were doing it when it first came out. It was like everywhere. Everyone was doing that. At least from my perspective, I'm getting all the feedback, dozens and dozens of people. But yeah, that was one of the things that John, and it's totally true. Like, you keep giving to the universe and those things keep coming back. And if you're stingy with stuff that can help people, I think, call it karma, call it just the nature of how we are. Is, reciprocal altruism is what a sociologist or psychologist might call it. Like, you help people, they'll turn and help you back. Not always. Some people are assholes. Some people are takers. Some people are givers. But just keep on being a giver, of all the stuff that's important. And I think that's the way to, that's how John lived his life. And look how he's remembered now. It's freaking amazing.
There's got to be a caveat to that, though. I mean, keep giving that information if you've got something to give. And, there's so many people giving information out now that's not even worth being given out. So,
right.
You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. The caveats are, one, if someone could hurt themselves with that information, like, oh my God, if you do 3 grams of Deca, you're going to grow like a weed. Like, okay, no, don't tell people that, it may be the case for some people, but don't say that. That was what I was concerned with the head down tilt, is like someone's going to, cause some gastric reflux issue, or they're going to go, you have to be careful. Bodybuilders, if you say like, take 2, they're like, okay, I'll take 20, so
we've all done that. Like the pre-workout thing, it says 1 scoop. You're like, well, I'm a big guy, so I need at least 2.
Right.
And then
from having a little, in the back scenes, like for John's companies, like, you have to be careful. Like, people, there are things that are like, the clinically dosed amounts that make sense given the research, but then you're like, okay, we got to be careful. If we put 300 milligrams of caffeine in here, people are going to take 600. So, got to watch that. But so, yeah, that's a caveat. And then the caveat from the receiver's end is like, yeah, be critical, learn to listen, use your common sense. And I guess it's sort of being, it's kind of a cliche thing, but it's about being kind of mindful of like what's going on. This is a whole other topic, but there's a whole sort of field of study now. The placebome actually is what it's called. There's a whole number of genetic markers of susceptibility to the placebo effect. And I could, talk a little bit more about that, but there are certain individuals who are going to be more likely to fall prey to a placebo effect, and which can be a great thing. They've actually done polls of athletes where they said, if your coach were to tell you something that would make you believe that what they're giving you is going to make you a better athlete, and it worked, would you care if it was a placebo or not? And they're like, hell no, I don't care how it works. If it works, it works. That's what matters. So being aware of the fact that you fucking love bodybuilding and you're going to do anything you can to try to get ahead, and like, you know what, I may be actually, I don't consider myself an idiot, but I may be easily duped by certain things. Maybe I should stop, put that on the table, you know, ask them more questions like, hey, what do you know about this guy? It's like, oh, okay, yeah, he's good. Okay, great. It sounds like he might have some good information there. I'll try it out. But being able to just step back a little bit and know yourself. You know, on the other hand, someone could be, you know, I'm too conservative, which is odd for a bodybuilder, but it could be that some people are, you know, overly critical. I've run into that too, where I can think of some people offhand. I won't name any names, but some people who are like, they have like this won't work for me, and I've got bad genetics, and you know, they've got sort of a chip on their shoulder, a monkey on their back. And I've thought to myself, man, if I could just hypnotize you and make you believe you're an unstoppable force of nature, and we just went to town and said, fuck the body fat, I'm going to get as big as humanly possible for the next 5 years, become a beast safely, watching my blood markers, etc., they would make progress. But they're overthinking things. So knowing where you lie on all those spectrums is super important. So yeah, like the information you take in, like tons of caveats, tons of you know, grains of salt, so to speak, that could apply.
Yeah. We can go down that rabbit hole another day, I guess.
All right.
In terms of questions, I think there is a couple of others on there, but
here.
Yeah, we're going to be here.
Yeah, I don't want to keep you guys too long.
No, we're not worried about us.
I'm good.
It's one of those ones. What we do on the do.
Well, I wanted to know, like, in recent times, what are the most recent or greatest discoveries that has matched, like, in your opinion, science to maybe something that we already actually knew, but whether there's anything really groundbreaking that has happened.
Science is always kind of lagging. You know, it seems like there's things I can tell you about. My favorite study, I've talked about it so many times, but so it was 2 studies actually. The first study, and you guys may have heard this. I'll give it to you anyway because it just fits so fucking well. First study, they wanted to examine the effect of training frequency and volume in this case on muscle growth. So they employed what's called a within subjects model. So they just trained the quads. Each training session was 3 sets of 10 to failure. And one leg got trained 5 times a week. So Monday through Friday, 3 sets of 10 to failure, adjusting the weight as necessary, progressive overload. And the other leg got hit either 2 times a week or 3 times a week. So half the subject came in like Monday, Wednesday, Friday. The other half came in like Tuesday and Friday, something like that. So they had comparisons of 5, 3, and 2 times a week, and 15, 9, and 6 sets, basically. And so look, that's a pretty nice range of volume. And you think you might, if there's some advantage to one or the other, you might see an advantage. There's no advantage. They ran the stats. Everything was the same. They wrote up their study. We don't see any significant differences here, so it doesn't matter. So someone who like is maybe an abstract scientist is the term that's kind of used. They read the abstracts, you know, and they don't have an understanding of the statistics, which is very, very complicated. It can be, it doesn't need to be, but they just say, well, it doesn't matter. Like you could train twice a week or you train 5 times a week. It doesn't matter. It's all the same. Well, they very smartly, and they had to have seen this when they're looking through their data. This is the thing. You can do a test like that, and the study was correctly interpreted, so to speak, from the perspective that the study was engineered to examine. So the idea is like, would we systematically see an advantage of 5 versus 3 versus 2 times a week with these varying frequencies and volume along with it? And no, you wouldn't expect to see that systematically. Like in general, you couldn't say, you know what, the majority of the people are going to do better with 5 times versus twice a week, for instance. Nothing. Then they looked at the individuals. This is where the shit hit the fan. And this is in like, I think it's in my Muscle Minds podcast with Scott McNally. It's like probably 100 or 101. 101, 102, we kind of did some cool studies like this. So if you want to see some of them old or some of them are new, this is a newer one. So the follow-up study came out just a couple of years ago. They went and they looked at the individual responses. Remember, this is the same people training one leg 5 times a week, the other leg 2 or 3 times a week. And they just lumped the 2 or 3 times a week for the sake of simplifying it all, because it was about the same. They found that there were people who had extreme responders, like 20% increase in muscle size, which for a quad is fucking ridiculous. I've seen that in a subject that I trained for my dissertation, and like his quad looked like it belonged on someone else after we're done with it. It was gigantic. And
Danny,
then there was
taking notes. Danny, you taking
Yeah,
notes?
I may have got this.
yeah,
In one leg and then
right. Well, that's another topic, but anyway, then there were some people who didn't get shit. Like either way, there was one that was basically kind of a non-responder, like nothing, regardless of how he trained, or they're all guys, so how he trained. Then there were some who did about 1/3 of them did better with the higher volume versus the lower volume. So 5 times a week, much better than 2 or 3 times a week. Then there was another third that did much better with the low volume. So they're like Dorian versus Ronnie. The high volume didn't work for them. The Dorian style worked for them. And then there was 1/3 that it didn't really matter. Both were about equal. So if you look at all of them, huge responders to no responders, high volume to low volume to high volume. So which works better? It depends on who you are. If you look at the original study, it's like it doesn't matter. And someone throws that in your face. It's like it doesn't matter on average if we were trying to predict this generalize this to the population. But if you look at the individual, hell yeah, it made a big difference. You look at something they posted, and you can see this in the podcast, or we talked through the diagrams. You can see the differences. Like it's twice as much growth in one versus another. This is over like just a 12-week study. That's noticeably visible to the person, one training style versus the other. And that's what actually matters. So my kind of take on that, when you look at the science, and here's the thing, like the studies will be done to see how generalizable some particular condition is, way of training, taking a supplement, what have you. But you've always got a broad, pretty much every time you're going to have some spectrum of responsiveness of adaptation. And it's going to vary depending on the person. So you find a study that shows nutrient timing works really well, and it's a solid study. That means it worked under in that situation. That may not be in another situation, when you see with another study. If you see a study where there was no effect on average, but if you can see the individual data points, someone may have had a great effect. Some people may have had a negative effect. So the average doesn't tell you, because there's no average person. There are people who are close to average in various things. So that study, I thought that was brilliant, to go back and actually look at the individual. And what that kind of does is like, shit, that doesn't, it really constrains the mentality that people have with scientific studies, when you realize that doesn't tell you necessarily anything about the individual. Because the first study said there's no difference the way you read it.
But that's from like a quantitative perspective, isn't it? Taken holistically from all of it. That is what you come up with if you put the numbers in.
But I personally feel like even over time, as your ability to become stronger, and then other variables of life, work, family, so on, eat into your recovery capabilities and your age and other factors, your training systems are not going to stay the same. So nothing is absolute.
Absolutely. Yep. And it's funny that you say that, because you're kind of partially reading my mind. Here's the thing. Yeah, good. It's a good talent. I consider resistance exercise something that it's a hormetic stimulus. So there's a dose response curve where low amounts of sets, low volume. You could say the same thing for, like, just call it the dose of exercise. So assuming you train hard enough that each set matters, and you do one set, you'll get some amount of adaptation. You do 2 or 3, 5 or 6, let's say in the course of a week. And we're not just ignore now, like whether frequency matters, whether 1 time a week is better than 3 times a week or what have you. But in some way, there's a dose response for each individual. Some people might do best with 8 sets a week. Others can recover from 15 sets a week. But if we said, you know what, let's see if resistance exercises produces muscle growth, and let's have everyone do 60 sets, make sure we get plenty in there. Are they going to grow? No, because it's hormetic response. It doesn't just go to infinity. More is not always better. And that's the thing that's really interesting about this, like this first study, the one that I just mentioned, is, for some people, I would imagine going in 5 times a week, 3 sets to absolute failure. I get sore really easily. I would be pretty crippled from that. I would do it. I've done crazier shit than that for sure, but I would just keep on doing, but I wouldn't grow from that. I wouldn't make any progress. I would never recover from that if I did 3 all-out sets, really to true failure. So that's the thing that is really, it's a really unfortunate weakness of exercise science, is that it's such a soft science. So imagine like you got the science of aspirin, and we want to figure out whether it's better to take 100 milligrams of aspirin 3 times a day, or a 300 milligram dose, or what have you. And the amount of, but let's say the dose of aspirin could be 100 milligrams, or it could be 30 milligrams, or 450 milligrams, or 4,000 milligrams. They've done studies with 3 sets in a training session and done studies with 45 sets in a week. So the training program matters a lot as to what you're going to get. And there are so many studies. Literally, I don't know what percentage, maybe someone's looked into this, but there are many, many studies where you've got a placebo group, control group, and you've got a treatment group, and they're testing a supplement or who knows what, and they don't get growth in either group, So it's like, okay, well, that you're not testing anything. You didn't have an effective training program, really. Or maybe, sometimes it's nice. There have been times where someone could go backwards. That if we almost did a study this way back when I was in grad school. If something like creatine, let's say, or some supplement can prevent overtraining, that's a thing to look into, like keep you from backsliding necessarily. Mm-hmm. So replication is a big issue. And that's why then you see, well, we want to get an effect. The larger the effect you see, the better you're going to be able to pick up on those things statistically. So we can generalize to the people we're studying. That's why they pick newbies, the beginners, because they'll have a monster effect. But then you have the ceiling effect. Like, well, it doesn't matter. These people grew as fast as they possibly could because they've got newbie gains going on. So it doesn't matter if you give them creatine or give them, something to help them sleep at night or add extra this, that, or the other. It doesn't make a difference. So, and the thing that's one more thing, just while I'm just combining sort of science and real practical application, and I talk about this in that podcast series, the Muscle Minds one, is there's so few studies where they do what bodybuilders know you have to do to make gains once you're past the newbie gains, is pile in the food. There's a handful of studies. There's probably, less than a dozen for sure. And there's like only a few that are really worth looking at where they actually forcefully created a caloric surplus. There's studies on there's reviews like, do we need this? It's like, well, no, you don't. When you're a newbie, you don't. But for resistance training as our stimulus, if you're stuck at 220 pounds and you've been there for 3 years and you're eating 3,500 calories a day, guess what you're going to have to start doing? It's pretty obvious, but we don't study that in the science. So you got to take those bits and pieces and know how to contextualize them. But that's the best. That's one of the best studies. I would love to see someone. I've read a couple studies I'd love to see. I'd love to see some more overfeeding studies, to see how variable that is.
I do a lot of that.
Yeah. Personally, those are case studies, but that could be done too. I'd love to see case studies, with individuals. Like, I have in my book, supplement section is all the stuff that help your gastrointestinal system out. Like, those are ergogenic aids in a sense. You're getting where you're putting down 5,000 or 6,000 calories a day, and you need. And are enzymes helpful? Are probiotics helpful? Is taking the right kind of fiber in helpful? Is adjusting the right kind of food so you get that food down? Are supplements helpful to get the extra calories in? What happens if you take a group? Like, here's a practical study that no one wants to be a subject for. Is like 6,000 calories. You got to eat, chicken and rice, clean food, and then you have 6,000 calories where you have some healthy fats in there. 2 of the meals are shakes that are easily pre-digested, basically. Which group does better with that? Ask for their ratings. How's their training work? The number of things you could study. So there's some things that are missing, but there are some good stuff. There are some good things that come out. It's just a matter of people like Brad Schoenfeld, who's doing a lot of cool stuff, because he was a bodybuilder himself and a personal trainer himself for years. So that's the best one I can give you to answer your question. I can poke more holes.
I kind of look at it as practical science, because for me, the book says one thing, and we all know this with coaching people, the body will just laugh and be like, nope. And until you've actually done that over and over and over again and come up to that like problem and tackled that problem, you won't have the answer to it. Do you know what I mean? Because the book won't always have the answer, because this, as you said, everybody is so different and the variables are so different. Do you know what I mean? So I like science. I do love the science part of it, but also it needs to be practical.
You mean if I train like Ronnie, I won't be as big as Ronnie?
No, just turn black.
Right.
But these are like starting points. Like I was saying to this with my students today about giving them information about starting off mixing in engineering. And so I was like, the information I've got you don't have to do this, but this is a good starting point to kind of like calibrate from. And then you can go and start implementing it, get the feedback and see whether it's actually applicable to you. Obviously, like the application is completely different, but the science is good from a starting point. So you're not fucking all the way over here trying to just randomly stab in the dark, hoping that something works.
Right.
And then it's the application, the personalization from there. And then knowing how to interpret the feedback. I think, again, it goes back to the people wanting to read a study or quoting a study as if that makes it absolute fact for everyone. And it's just because they don't know how to actually, they don't know. They go, it's science, it's in a study, it says some names, so it's definitely true. If I say it to people, then it's facts, and you can win any argument with facts.
Well, if you probably have seen this yourself, if you train with anyone who's a hyper responder, they can do whatever the fuck they want.
Yeah.
And you're like, what? So it's like they train less than you, not as hard as you, eat fuck all KFC and a protein shake, and they literally just grow. And that's where it's like science is great, but it's just that's an anomaly. That's just different. Like it's just, it doesn't always apply to everybody.
Well, you'd have that in the research as well, when you would have someone like that, Scott, and just write them off because they would throw the research off so much.
They throw outliers out. That's why having the individual data is just it's a godsend whenever that's there. One thing you can do, and this is you can look at the means and the standard deviations, knowing the number of subjects in the groups, and see how wide the spread was. Like you can see that. So, literally, and this is, maybe I could show this sometime. Like I'm not a statistician, but this is sort of basic statistics, having done a little of this in the past. You could say like, okay, so let's say we have 100 people, and you know the means, and you know the standard deviations. You could predict like how many people you might find who were in the 90th percentile, and where actually not only that there'd be 10 of them or 5 on either end, but that you would also be able to know how far from the mean those people are. So if the mean improvement is 2 kilograms and you got a standard deviation of 4, that means you got a huge spread. You can take that out either direction. Some people went backwards and some people went forwards because the standard deviation was wider than the difference in the mean or the pre to post change. So and if you see the data, it's nice to see just means and standard deviation. A scientist is kind of used to looking at that. I'll never forget, like my mentor, like he was really good at that. He'd look at that and he'd just say, what's the standard error right there? Because you can do a quick, like in your head statistical analysis, knowing the standard error bars and amounts, which is why those should always be there. When you just say averages, it means nothing. When you say what the standard deviation are, it means like, wow, this is a huge spread. Well, no wonder, because the responses were just all over the place. Some people did really well and some did terrible, just like in the study I talked about before. You could have, for instance, like popped into my head. So let's say you've got a program that is for one person is the perfect kind of number of sets and reps to optimize adaptation. It's not too little, it's not too much, it's kind of right there. And you want to see, for that person, or let's say it's a little bit less, so they could use a little more stimulus. And so the intervention you have is we're going to add some eccentrics to the training. And eccentrics give you more load. Those are more or less where you get most of the soreness and muscle damage that comes there. And that definitely, eccentrics in general are better at producing muscle growth than concentrics overall. You see this when you compare concentrics versus eccentrics. Number of ways you can kind of look at this information. So for someone who's got a suboptimal training load, you add an intensifier in by doing eccentrics. Lift with one, lower, lift with both, lower with one, lift with both, lower with one, or some forced reps with controlled eccentric at the end or something like that. That could take that suboptimal training load and optimize it for them. That's good. That's more progress, assuming they can recover and everything else is lined up. Now you take someone who's optimized their training, they just don't recover as well, or they're doing a different program with more sets and reps and they train harder. And now you say, and they're basically at anything more, and they're going to be overreaching and heading down an overtraining tunnel if they go too long that way. Now they add in eccentrics. For that person, they shit the porch. This is not good. They go the wrong direction. They're pooping in their car on the way home. They're having troubles. They're overreaching. They're going the wrong way. So which is it? Do eccentrics help or do they hurt? Depends on the person.
Would you say, sorry, Scott, to interrupt you, but would you say for people who are listening and who are like looking at devising their own training, would you say to start on minimal frequency, minimal volume, and then collect the data from how they feel, how their training performance is, how their recovery is, how their sleep is, and then gauge it and build on that? Or would you have a standardized amount of volume and frequency for everyone?
Are you talking about like day zero? They're completely
no. Like if say let's take me for example, and I was going to start a training program. Would you say, okay, well, let's start on the baseline of we know you can recover from, and then add on to that? Or would you? What would that? You know what I mean?
Yeah, with you, I would scour your training history.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, and then
for the things that have worked the best,
and build it from
the
that.
times. Yeah, so just history is success leaves clues.
Mm-hmm.
You got your pro card, right? Yes, you got the pro card.
He's never mentioned it.
I think I heard this. I saw it somewhere.
Pro.
What's that?
It was Miami Pro card. That's what
So, but there's something that has worked for you in the past. So figure out what those things are, and sometimes it can just be, looking back at your logbook or thinking back. It's like, holy shit, I've tried adding all these little tidbits along the way to kind of make things better, and it really didn't work. When I was just doing bare bones basic, it was best for me. So there, I would start with that, and then if you're completely clueless, then dropping back to some degree. I always, the other thing I look for then is what haven't you done? That and this goes for like just having done different types of trainings. If you start a new training system that you haven't done for a long while, it's going to be novel, and the novelty is the key to muscle growth, in my mind. Just something that's new and different that is a new and novel stimulus for you. So you made me define something you've never done before. Like, let's say, you've never done a Dorian Yates style training, where you really try to, and you don't have any reason that, you need to stay away from really, really heavy lifting and getting as strong as humanly possible. You've never done that, then give that a shot. A lot of times, another thought, so this is like a third strategy, is look at people like to do what they're really good at.
What they enjoy.
What's that?
I think they like what training style they enjoy most.
Yeah, right. So if you're like the strongest dude in the gym, like you like to go in there and lift really, really heavy and do stuff that no one else can do. And if you keep doing that and you're not growing, well, then that's telling you something. Maybe you need to step back and figure out a way to make the exercises more difficult to target the weak muscle groups because you're using accessory muscles. Let's say, best example, one of John's clients, Ken Jackson, who recently came back and competed. It looked really, really good. If you ever look at some of the old videos, you can find them on John's YouTube channel or just on his YouTube channel. He has Ronnie Coleman level pressing strength. He's a crazy, crazy strong presser. 500-pound bench press for 6 and 8 reps, flat press, when he's 6 weeks out or something like that. 200-pound dumbbells, for 10 reps, just ridiculous. But his chest was a weak muscle group, had been for a long time. But he loved to train chest because he's a delt presser, and strong triceps. So John had to have him do things that, made him use weights that were like way below what he could have moved if he engaged everything, but instead, put him on a pec deck, and have him push just with the pinky side of his hand, and get his delts out of there, externally rotate. So he's not internally rotating using the anterior delt, that kind of stuff. So figure out what you've gotten good at, what you're really good at, and whether that's working for you. If progressive overload is working for you, heavy loads are working for you, low reps are working for you, then keep doing it. But if not, do what you've never done. Take the other way around. As long as that's the thing. I've got an article. I guess I'll mention, this is breaking news here. I've got an article I'm writing that I was kind of pecking away at. That's kind of cool. And it's exploring the landscape of muscle hypertrophy. And there's so many things that can produce muscle growth. You got, what are the animal models where you like clip the soleus and let the animal walk around, and the gastrocnemius, the plantaris grow like crazy, like triple the rate of muscle growth you'd ever get in the weight room, just from the chronic, continuous, all-day overload. Be like lifting weights all the time. And those quail stretch studies, where they hang the weight off the quail's wings, and that would be like hanging like a 40-pound dumbbell off your hand all day long, walk around, then watch your trap grow. So there's those sorts of things produce muscle growth. You can do high rep sets, like 30, 40% blood flow occlusion types of things. And as long as, especially if those sets are taken in failure, you can get muscle growth with really light weights. You keep reps, 5, 6 reps and above per set, you can produce growth there. So there's a huge range of muscle growth. So you kind of go out onto the landscape of what you looked at, what you've done, what's worked for you, and say, okay, I've been beating around in this area of that landscape with the heavy weights, the high volume, or the lower volume Dorian-Yates, or wherever it is. It's like, I need to try something different. What would happen if I trained every other day, instead of once a week? There's reason why that might be, and I can go into my guessing as to how that might be working for people who do have success with increasing their frequency. What have you ever really developed a good mind muscle connection? You just go in there and move the biggest weights you can. So figure out like all the things, and like which of the tools have I not used, which of the areas of that hypertrophy landscape in terms of reps and load are still available to me. And then you can go into frequency and volume, off time. Like one of the things, it's funny, this is one of my earliest clients from Fortitude Training had trained really, really hard. He's a mathematics teacher, a math teacher. I tell this story because it just was so funny, especially the way he explained it to me. So doing Fortitude Training, really pushed the food, taking in massive post-workout meals. It was amazing. And he had never really done a true deload. And I constructed the deloads of Fortitude Training so that you drop back on your volume, you still train hard, and then you have about 1/3 of that off time where you're really not doing anything, kind of active recovery. So you're just chomping at the bit. You come into the gym. And he came in, and of course, he'd been logbooking everything, and he knew what he'd done previously on those heavy sets. So he chose, weight, it was a little bit higher if he needed because he's at the top of the rep range, or he just stuck with the same weight, thinking he could get from the low to the top end of the rep range. He was blowing everything away. He was taking 10 rep sets, turning them into 22 rep sets. And he's like, what the fuck? Like, I thought I wrote this number. Like, can I count? What is wrong? Like he was doubling his reps on everything, thinking that he's a mathematics teacher and he can't even count the weight on the bar that he's making, but it happened everywhere. And for him, he had never had a deload before. I think the Fortitude Training helped. And I think, the way I constructed it was, made sense. I have lots of people that have really good success with taking a deload like that, or it's kind of more of a taper actually. But maybe that's what you need, is to take time off. which has maybe been the opposite of what you've ever thought about doing. It's like, I got to keep on pushing. The next guy's not going to outwork me. Well, maybe the next guy is outsmarting you because he takes some time off and lets his brain, like even Ronnie Coleman would take 2 months off, after the Olympia and not do shit. And then he'd dig back in again. So this could be a bunch of things. It's hard to like generalize it, as to where, but starting, especially if you come back off and you quote unquote resensitize, so to speak, starting up from a place where you haven't trained for a while, that does make sense not to do a whole lot. This last weekend, I was down, it was Thanksgiving. I was down south training at a gym in Bonita Springs, Florida, where I go to. Smash Fitness is called. And there's a couple guys I saw in there. And the one guy, the second time I seen him, they're training legs and he's kind of wobbling around. I'm like, looks like you're getting shit done, man. He's like, yeah, this is going to be a rough one. And it was the first time he trained legs in like 2 years. He'd taken a lot of time off to build his business and various things. And they just got doing like the humbler pendulum squat. And I don't know what they did before that, but I'm like, dude, how much have you done? You're going to destroy yourself. And he was just doing the regular training. I don't know. I don't have a way to contact him, but he was crushed. That was just silly. There's no reason for that. So
yeah, but it was fun though.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he did have fun. He did have fun.
You haven't heard from him because he is actually disabled.
Yeah, exactly.
No one's heard from him at all.
Yeah, that's it.
He's just downing aminos, hoping that one day he'll be able to walk again.
The rhabdo can hit, man. There's, I know of studies where subjects had so much muscle breakdown that they had kidney failure just from training the biceps, just elbow flexors.
Fuck.
Yeah. So, but untrained people, and there's variability there. But anyway, to get to your question though, it's going to depend on, the person, what they know has worked for them, but starting up and building up, just kind of see where you are. I think that's a great approach. If you're not quite sure, it could be like, you'll surprise yourself. It's like, wow, I stuck with, low volume for me and I just keep on getting stronger. And I'm like, I'm not expecting this. So the temptation is like, well, more is better, right? So let's just keep on doing more sets. And if the strength and the mass with the food is all in line, so you're making gains, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Keep going. So a reset like that is a really good approach if you're really not quite sure. But there's lots of ways to do that. That's a great question, but it's such an individual one. It's hard to say.
The hardest thing I find is differentiating between the things I enjoy, like the way I enjoy to train, and what's best for me. Right. And I think being around Dan more now on a weekly basis has helped me with that, because he's a very low frequency trainer, and I've always been a very high frequency. And I've always enjoyed going to the gym more for the mental aspects, the switch off. And I think that's been to my own detriment. I've lowered my frequency and sort of I'm reaping the rewards from that recently, So I think that's another important thing for me, I think, really. And I think others will probably have the similar thing, is what you enjoy doing and what you need to do for development may be two different things.
Yeah. And being aware, I've got a discussion board for the Fortitude training. People bought the book. It's free. They come on there and ask me whatever they want to. And I've had numerous times where people are just like, I want to just train 6 times a week. And they know, like, we kind of hash through and we pick it apart. And it's like, this is too much for you. And, but, here we got a Foxy dope.
Oh, I did see some fluff coming over.
Hey.
Bubba.
Yeah. Yeah, my little escape artist.
You got a tracker on him.
Yeah. He hasn't needed it for a while, but yeah, she runs, man. Don't ya?
Oh,
yeah. And yeah, so these guys will know, like, they're totally aware that, I'm doing too much, but I'm happy doing it, and they're willing to like take the negatives, the lack of progress or whatever. I'm like, okay,
Yeah, if you're willing to do it. I mean, I've just said to me, who's my trainer, who Dorian said to him, because he said, I love training, I just love going in the gym, I want to train. He was like, do you love training more than you like results?
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I don't know. But if you really aren't after the results, and it is murder prevention, as Joe Bennett said when he was on here, then yeah, if that's what it's used for, then cool. But if you want to make progress, sometimes less is more. But like with anything you put on social media, everyone will then kind of go, I've been training for 3 days, I weigh 8 stone, I better have 3 deloads and then carb backload, and then no one can pitch in the middle anymore.
Right. And sometimes people get to where it's like, I've made most of my newbie gains. If I'm at 85% versus 90% of my genetic potential or whatever, and I get to train an extra 2 days a week, it's fucking worth it. Not that big of a deal. I'm in the gym. Like, these are my friends, I love being there. It's my lifestyle. It's what I do, Yeah. So it's hard to weigh that, you could do all sorts of things, but if you're not happy with the endeavor, is it really even worth it?
Yeah.
So,
being huge and miserable.
Huge and frustrated.
Yeah. So
I think we should go for 3 quick fires.
Okay. So normally, Scott, at the end of our podcast, what we do with our guests is ask for 3 sort of quick fire top tips. Well, it's 5 normally, but we're going to slim them to 3 because you've already given plenty. Just sort of quick fire top tips to people who are listening, stuff that you kind of wish you'd known.
They don't have to be bodybuilding related. Loads of the ones we've been given are absolute shit. So don't worry about them too much.
I love how Ryan laughed because he knew
when we had Ryan on first, his were proper shit. I can't remember what mine were when I first came on.
I don't think you even.
We didn't do it then.
No, because you weren't really a guest. That was just my way of trapping you as a horse.
Was that what you did?
Yeah,
you little fucker!
I
never knew
that.
Now he's here.
So Scott, help me. Anyway,
so I got to give you 3, just 3. All right. Memento mori. Someone asked this, and I had it kind of in my head. Memento mori means remember that death comes to us all. So seize the fucking day, man. Sometimes I don't necessarily do this because who knows what would happen. Probably wouldn't be here right now if I did, but this happened. I just had this thought earlier today. Like, if I had a year to live, what would I do? How different would it be from what I'm doing now? And if people have that, you see all these people, someone gets cancer and they nearly die, or the automobile accident, or something happens, just life-changing effect. And they just they're like, fuck it. Why am I living in the rat race? Or why am I doing this? Or this is the wrong job for me. Or, I'm not spending enough time with my family, whatever it is. And they just change their value. So if you can really bring that one in, then it'll change your life. Do it right. Yep. The other, and I've given this answer before, is know thyself. And that's a hard fucking thing to do, but it's just, we don't like to be honest with ourselves all the time. And it could be like, in a bodybuilding context, would be like, you know what? I've been pounding away. I've been doing everything I possibly can. I'm using all the drugs. I'm doing all the training. I'm learning everything, and I don't have pro card genetics. Maybe it's not going to happen. So I'm going to have to reset this. That happens every once in a while. People are pretty good with it, or I just don't train hard enough. Like, I'm living in this land of disillusionment where I think I'm going to be something I'm not. And I keep on putting myself in this place of not achieving things because I'm not being honest with myself, and let's see what else. The third one, I'll make it a bodybuilding. I already gave John.
Make it an upper. This one's been a bit of a downer. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
Let's have a bit of an uprise at the end. You're going to die, and you might be shit. So we can have a.
Get some speed boots in.
Let's see here. An upper, a positive one. I think those are all positive, to be honest.
Well, tomato.
Yeah, true. Death, memento mori, what was it? What did I just hear?
I thought he died then.
Yeah, no, yeah, probably actually died.
Me and Dan got the same thing.
I thought it was just a little bit too long. It was just a little bit too long.
That's it. Actually, he died doing what he loves on a podcast.
And we never knew what the third one was. That's how he should be remembered.
Everyone's playing that back again and again, trying to, like, you know, like if we play it backwards, maybe it says something cryptic. Like,
Yeah, there's a message.
something magical that he said. I can't remember what it was. His dying breath. We don't know what it was.
Melting.
No, I was gonna say. I was gonna say you can get the most from the least that you possibly can in bodybuilding. Get the most from the least, and that goes for drugs. That goes for training. That goes for time in the gym and everything else. Because that way you can get the most you possibly can in life. So get the most from the least.
I think one of our previous hosts would have disagreed with that one.
That's why he's gone. Dead to us.
Still in the gym.
He's still in the gym, yeah.
Yeah, he's still at the gym. He couldn't commit because he has to train for 5 hours a day.
Is that what it was? He had his next session?
Yeah, it's still happening now from Monday.
Oh shit.
Still happening.
Oh shit.
All right, man.
You guys. Yeah, appreciate it.
Thank you so much, mate.
Yeah, thank you. That was epic. Loved it.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah.
We know when we've had a good guest on because Dan is good. He's quiet.
I don't need to say anything. I'm just filling the gaps usually with just
Right.
bullshit. But
Right.
when there's bombs being dropped, I don't need to talk. So that's a good sign.
Okay, sure.
Indeed.
Those good. The other 3 questions are good, man. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not usually that good. If I'm completely honest, and I was to summarize how well they go generally, it's pretty shit.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean,
Yours were good, but if we were going to do like a show reel of all of them, it would be short, you know, like
Right. Yeah. Well, me dying at the end, like you know,
that would have been. I mean, I was like, it would be
It's
sad,
all
but our
about-
views would go up. Like, would it?
Right.
Like,
Memento mori. And he's gone. Has an aneurysm trying to think of a third answer. Oh shit.
oh man,
on that bombshell, gentlemen,
Yes.
thank you very much, Scott. It's been a pleasure, bud.
Yeah.
yeah, thank you, mate. Big love, man.
Yeah, we can do it again if you guys want. Just let me
Oh,
know.
mate,
Oh, hell
100%,
yes.
yeah.
you heard it here. I'll print that.
Okay. I'm a podcast whore. That's what I tell everyone. I pretty much do every podcast.
Gigolo.
Yeah, there you go, man. There you go.
That's what we would like to hear.
Yeah.
All right, man. Thanks, though. And the rest of you guys, see you
All right,
next
guys.
time.
Very well, boys.
Thanks, Jeds.
Peace.
Take care.